Good evening, everyone. Today is September 10th, 2024, and the time is now 6:07 p.m. I call this meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Now, pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Urban Design Commission is conducted via remote participation. We will make recordings available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. My name is Sarah Lewis, and I am the co-chair for tonight's meeting. We'll start with a roll call of the commission members present. Frank Valdez.
Present.
Andrew Abba.
Present.
Deborah Fennick.
Present.
And Tim Talon.
Present.
Let the record show that we did, Sherry Ruane apologized, but she could not be here this evening, but with 4 members, we do have quorum. All right, our first order of business is the approval of the July 23rd and the August 13th, 2024 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments or notes that require correction on those meeting minutes?
I do not.
All right, seeing none. Can I get a motion to approve July 23rd and August 13th?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Frank, seconded by,
Second.
okay, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote. Frank,
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Deborah
Yes.
and Tim.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all. We do not have any recommendations for review at this time. So with that, we will move on to our first design review. Now, there's one thing that I do want to ask. As far as procedure order this evening, one of the cases, Commissioner Frank Valdez will need to recuse himself. Currently, that is the 3rd item on the agenda. Would you guys like to leave it in that position, or so that Frank can be relieved at the end of the meeting, or how would you like to proceed? Do you have any preference?
That would be fine.
Okay, all right, then we will proceed as the agenda notes. So our first design review is 181 Pearl Street. If applicants could raise their hands, I do want to note for the commission that the ZBA did approve the hardship variance for facade build out on this project, which was the reason that it had not been discussed last time, as that was unknown. So this project is continued from the 8/13 meeting. I will remind the applicants that they have 20 minutes to present. I'm promoting, where are we? Paul Miller, there's Pablo and Curtis Puncher, 2 panelists. Who will be sharing their screen this evening?
I will.
All right. All right, hopefully that gives you the permission.
Okay, great. Okay, good evening, everyone. Good to see you all again, and thanks for making time tonight for us. We're going to present our the design for 181 Pearl Street. So just quickly to go high level through our narrative here, the project is in MR3 zoning district. We're proposing 3 residential apartments at about 3,500 square feet gross. The proposed project is 3 stories tall and about 34 feet. It's a transit-oriented development with no car parking required nor proposed as part of the project. There's bike parking inside the residential lobby. It's an all-electric building, and as Sarah mentioned, we did receive the variance for the facade build-out a couple weeks ago. Okay, so just a quick overview of the location of the site. It's on Pearl Street 181 at the intersection with Dana near the McGrath Highway. Good proximity to transit, to the Magoon Square station of the Green Line, as well as several bus lines. And a nice kind of array of parks in the neighborhood, as well as the public library and the high school. Kind of an overview aerial photograph of the site and its context. You can see that there are a lot of 2.5-story buildings, some 3-story buildings, and larger as you go down Pearl Street. You're looking at 4 stories and 5 in some cases. And there's a kind of transition from the more traditional clapboard and shingle style to masonry buildings. And so it's sort of a mixed context in that way. It's a view of the existing building from the corner of Pearl Street and Dana, kind of standing right at the edge of McGrath Highway behind us. And these are the 3 facade options that we'll be looking at tonight. Our preferred option is on the left. It's a vertical anodized aluminum panel with a kind of triangulated ribbed profile. And the second option is brick, purple colored brick base with a white brick top. And the third option is a precast concrete that's kind of folded horizontally and with a kind of bright base and fascia. So we'll go option by option, showing a few different views of each. This is standing again at the corner of Pearl and Dana Street, looking at our preferred option, which is the anodized aluminum panel. We are excited about the kind of the massing of this option as well, using the provision for the bay window to create a kind of contemporary bay, which has a kind of dynamic presence on this corner. Which is a kind of prominent corner as you move along McGrath Highway. And then kind of carving the massing in and out to create outdoor spaces for everyone. So everybody gets the balcony, which is required in the zoning code, but we wanted to make it really an integral part of the massing of this project. And when the building cuts in for those balconies, we're showing a change in material to this kind of mint green aluminum panel. To give it a little bit of contrast, a little bit of color that picks up on some of the greenery in the project. This is a view just a little bit down Pearl Street, looking into the space between the neighboring property and ours. This is going to be the main entrance to the project. A ramp is provided so that there's the 0-step entry into the building. And there will be a stepped planter alongside that ramp. And we're looking at a couple different options for a kind of screen wall between the kind of small courtyard here and the neighboring properties. And I'll let Curtis from Ground speak to the landscape, the streetscape proposal a little bit later in the presentation. This is a view from Dana Street, looking at the Dana Street facade and kind of between that neighboring parcel and our facade. I apologize, we were missing a couple windows in the rendering here, so they're sketched in, but it's stacked with the windows below. Same bedroom layout as that unit below. Okay, and then the second option, the brick option, the kind of purple colored brick at the base and a lighter white colored brick above, same massing that we liked in the first option. the preferred option. Okay, and then the last one, kind of a departure from the other two, is looking at a precast panel that's folded to create some shadow play along the facade, and then going with a really bold kind of gold colored base and crown or fascia on the building. And also looking at a more like a translucent panel at the stair in the corner here. Different, exploring a different kind of breeze block screen wall as well in this one. Okay, so those are the facade options. I'm going to hand it off to Curtis to talk about the landscape.
Yeah, so guess we'll just do a counterclockwise walk around the property here, starting in the plan north. Some outdoor sort of flexible, usable space for the residents. It's permeable pavers. There is a sort of an aggregate surface in there. All the planting is native. Coming down the side, there's two understory trees. Out on the street, there is a canopy tree, an oak, with sort of a generous planting bed there between the sidewalk and the curb. Next, go for the next slide. We can go through the plant. I think there's a little more detail on the plants. Yeah, so just a little more sort of zoom in on the palette here. Again, they're all from the City of Somerville plant list, all native. Next slide. And we do meet the required green score. I think it's required is 0.3 and we hit 0.355. And we just included some of the, I guess, some of our details on the side here. Is there another landscape slide there, Paul?
That's it.
That's it, yeah. Yeah, so happy to go into any more detail there. I know that was pretty brief.
I think that's the end of our design presentation. We're happy to take questions and comments from the commission now.
I have a question on the landscape, and it may be a Sarah question more than anyone else. But it looks like the applicant is using the streetscape planter towards the green score. I think something like 38% of the green score is that oak tree. My understanding is that planting outside of the property line does not contribute to the green score. Has that changed, or is that correct?
No, that is correct. Yeah, the public right of way does not count towards the green score.
Okay. Then with that in mind, then the landscape plan does not seem to currently meet the green score.
Okay.
I also had some questions about the perimeter condition. I think, and I understand that this is schematic, and it looks like there's some variations based on the different designs, but generally speaking, can you kind of walk us through where there is fence and where there is wall? Because it's a little bit hard to parse in this one.
Curtis, maybe I can help with that a little bit. I'm going to pull up, actually, I'll just sketch it on here. So we have a fence here. Let me make a thicker pen. And then turning here across the back of the property, and then turning back again along the Pearl Street side. And then this is, I actually think that all of this is going to be breeze block along this side here. We're still studying the extents of that. But the solid fence right now is on the Dana Street wall here and partially along the neighboring wall with the Dana Street neighbor.
So I would ask if this project does return for a second round to have those items drawn in at the correct dimensionality because especially where that ramp is, the introduction of a block wall is going to preclude that from meeting ADA. It's going to cause you to shift the design. It can't accommodate that with the space that you have. And similarly, the detail that you guys are showing for that wall shows a spread footing, which would overlap into the neighboring property. So I think just confirming that you can construct that with an offset footing would be great too, and showing that detail.
Got it. And just so I understand, Andrew, you mean that we'll have to shift the ramp to the page right?
Well, the detail that you guys have on there is like an 18-inch block wall. So 18 inches, if you're putting it on that property line, is going to kick something over because that ramp is not wide enough once you put an 18-inch wall in there to meet ADA.
Okay, we'll have to look at that detail with ground. I understand your comment.
Can I, Chair's prerogative for a second, ask where the front door of the building is? It doesn't look like it's facing one of the facades, which I think it's required to.
I'm going to go to the architectural ground floor plan here. It's facing out into this courtyard.
I don't know that it's a question, but could you clarify or why and how that decision was made? And maybe to Sarah's point, is that legal?
I'm not aware of any rule that precludes us from having the front door there, but the reason that it's placed there is so that we can have a ramp up to the ground floor level, which is required in the zoning code to be 2 feet above the sidewalk. We're also required per the zoning code to have a 0-step entrance. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, that'll all come sort of during zoning compliance to make sure that is correct. So let's keep going.
Okay. I believe the project's been reviewed by ISD for zoning compliance, and the only thing that was flagged was the facade build out.
So there is a pretty generous setback between the property line and the front of the building that is paving right now. Can you talk a little bit about how that decision was made, or why is the building set where it is in relationship to the property line along the streets?
So I'll answer the setback question, and then I'll let Curtis talk about the ground treatment questions. We're required to have a 12-foot curb setback. I'm just going to sketch that in now. Foot. Yep. And on both street-facing sides of the building, that's required by the zoning code. And we're required to have a 10-foot side setback by the zoning code. So that determines the footprint of the building.
Okay.
I was wondering if you could talk just in general about your attitude towards the relationship between the materiality of this building and its context. I remember when the last version of this was presented, you talked about an idea, the relationship between a masonry character of this building and other masonry buildings of this type and scale that were further to the east of Gulf Street. Clearly, this is a very different material palette.
Right. Yeah, I think when the scale of the proposed project shifted, we took another look at the material palette, and we felt like we really liked the kind of reflective, specular nature of anodized aluminum, and we thought it would be a kind of beautiful addition to this corner. And we see that ribbed that triangular ribbed profile, which we have drawn. There we go. Is a little bit of a nod to the clapboard siding that you see in the neighborhood. In this case, it's right. It's a change in material. It's a change in orientation, but there is a kind of relationship there dimensionally that we like.
So I have a question about the roof, actually. So you have a flat roof. And maybe this is a question that maybe the Green Score may give you some thoughts about what has to happen to the roof. But what are you planning to do anything with the roof?
We cannot have an occupiable roof because we have it's a single stair building. And so the building code prevents you from having any kind of occupiable fourth story. So at this time, we're planning on a roof, that's just a simple roof membrane. There's no design on the roof.
You're not looking at, I think you've got good exposure for, if I'm not mistaken, sort of south exposure for
yeah. So
photovoltaics or voltaics, or you could, there could be some aspect of green roof there. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that a PV, for preparing the roof for future PV, it makes sense, and I believe may be required by the code at this point. And I think we'd be comfortable drawing that in, including a future PV array.
Yeah. I sort of had similar questions to Tim about, how this is fitting in the context. And I asked those also recognizing that it has sitting at the corner and that corner, and that it has an opportunity to be a bigger scale, in a transition to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I feel like I question the material. I'm not saying, I'm not feeling I'm feeling a little bit ambivalent about it, because I feel like I appreciate just the simple, it's a carved volume, playfully carved. It gets pretty regular as it's along the neighborhoods where windows are stacked on top of each other, and so it gets a little bit of verticality around the entrance, or I guess that's the stair inside, but and the entrance gets more regular. So I appreciate the form. I'm not 100% convinced about the materiality of it, but I do think that this corner can take this kind of gesture. So I do appreciate that. And little correction, that's not Magoon Square, I don't think, at the station. I think that is Gilman.
Oh
Gilman.
gosh, you're right. Thank you.
I was a little disoriented when I first looked at your plan.
You're so right. Thank you.
Hey, Paul, what happens on the underside of the projections? What do I see when I look up?
That's a good question. I think it should be matching metal panel, matching anodized. It's not going to have the standing, the ribbed profile. Right. It would be a flat panel, probably with an intermediate joint, which we would attempt to align with the carve-outs for the balconies.
Are you allowed to project into the 12-foot streetscape?
Yes.
Okay.
3 feet per the zoning code. It's because it's classified as a bay window.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Another question, can you talk about how the building meets the ground at the sidewalk?
Yes.
This, and I know it's schematic, it appears to show the ribbed metal panel coming all the way down, touching the sidewalk.
We feel that it's important to have some kind of water course just for durability. And I think we're showing a minimal one here. It might be 12 inches, and it would be a concrete water course.
Half in place, concrete.
Depends on how the detail shakes out. What we've done them is exposed concrete. We've also done, if it needs insulation, a cement board panel that gets parged and Sorry, it's a parge finish that you can specify the color for, but it's a cement look.
We done with questions?
Actually,
Yes.
I have one more that I would like to ask, and this comes to some of our internal UDC discussions recently. Have you spoken with Eversource yet
Yes.
about how this building will be
Thank you,
powered?
Sarah.
Yeah, so we did talk with Eversource and they felt that the load was low enough that we wouldn't need a transformer. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
I'd have to go back and check my notes, but because of the area of the project and the number of units, we are not required by Eversource to have a transformer.
Sarah,
It's-
could that be added to a condition to make sure that if it does get triggered at any point that it needs to be flagged? You know, from experience, what we've seen that we've heard this before, we've seen it different places. So it would be good to know that if there's a change in something, Paul, you know, because you never know what Eversource says. I think we would just want to be mindful of the fact that if that happens, that it doesn't get resolved like
By
as
being
a
dropped into the landscape.
Yes.
yes, that it needs
Yes.
to that it would need to be reviewed and something would trigger at least an observation as to where that being placed.
We can certainly note that. Yep, it's a good idea. Sorry for interrupting, Andrew.
No, that was it. I just felt like the question period was kind of wrapping up and maybe we could move to comments.
Absolutely.
I have Sherry's comments that she submitted. Do you want me to read those in? Is that okay? So this is from Sherry, and this was related to the last meeting, which she also couldn't make. But so this is not mine. This is just reading what I've gotten. So she feels like the choice of the anodized aluminum with the triangular profile ribs is ambitious, but risks creating a facade that will not age gracefully or blend seamlessly with the neighborhood. The reflective finish intended to add visual interest could instead cause glare for adjacent properties and passerbys. She doesn't love the aluminum grain. I'm going to sort of try to bring this down a little bit. The contemporary interpretation of the bay windows, though intended to add depth and character, might come across as overly simplistic and out of place compared with the more intricate traditional bays seen in the neighborhood. And then she feels like the pollinator garden and permeable paved courtyard contribute to the city's ecological goals, but their long-term maintenance and viability are uncertain. The integration of these green spaces with the overall urban landscapes requires careful planning to ensure remain vibrant over time. Out of the three options, she prefers the third because it articulates 3 stories in consistency with some of the neighbors and limits the potential for nuisance reflection towards neighbors. Now she won't yell at me because I read it. I can start. I guess the part that I really struggle with, well, I feel like there needs to be a lot. There needs to be more coordination between what we're seeing in the renderings and the landscape, because again, like this site is so tight that 18 inches makes a big difference, and the renderings and the landscape are just not syncing up in a way that is believable. I think having a little bit of grading, especially an understanding of how that ramp is going to happen on that edge condition as well, would be really helpful. And then the biggest thing that, like, honestly, like, kind of weirds me out, it's such a prominent and bold architectural move, but then the heighting of the front door, and I understand that it's for a grading purpose, but the sighting of the front door and basically the backyard just seems really, really bizarre to me, to have this thing this building that's just so noticeable, and then you get to it and you can't figure out how to get in. And I don't know that I would necessarily think or feel comfortable as a neighbor, as somebody living on this street, wanting to come visit my friend in this, that I should walk into what is really going to feel like, to me, a backyard to access these people's homes and to see my neighbors. Like that doesn't feel inviting to me. And there's such a lovely stoop culture, like people hanging out on their front porch all throughout the city. That's where I talk to my neighbors, and this just feels like it's really abandoning that in favor of a very bold and architectural form, which is lovely, but doesn't seem incredibly people focused.
Is it okay if I respond to that? Or do we want to go through more comments first?
No, it's fine with me.
Yeah, because I hear you and I appreciate those comments. I mean, we do in my office strive to design people-focused architecture, and I think that we maybe aren't showing it in a way that's the most clear here, but the intention is that this is an open, inviting space that is kind of semi-public. We want it to feel open enough that it's clear that this is the front entrance into the building. My preference would have been to have the front door on the street, but you cannot do that with the zoning code requirements and the size of this parcel. It's just not possible. And we looked at a bunch of different ways to do it. And we do think, on the other hand, like having an accessible entrance to the building is a beautiful thing. And I understand the goal that the city has to get the first floor apartment off of the street level so people aren't looking in. So I think that on balance, I get where the zoning code is coming from with these requirements. And this is just the place that the door needs to be on this particular parcel. And so then it becomes, how do you make this kind of side courtyard as beautiful and welcoming as possible? And maybe that is the thing, that needs a little bit more work here. I love the idea of the stoop culture, and maybe we have a kind of built-in bench here at the entryway. You can see it here in the plan on the right. Maybe that should come out to the street instead of having the planter. I don't know. It's something that we could look at. And so it's sort of like
I think that's where the grading information would be really helpful on this.
If I can just hop in quickly also, Andrew, thanks for the comments. I agree with you in terms of the essence of what it is that you were expressing and feeling. And definitely I love the aspect of the kind of stoop culture as you put it in Somerville. And I think everything Paul's saying I agree with. Of course, that was our approach in trying to figure out how to make this site work. I just wanted to add, the reason that we also like this massing is because we feel like the balconies, while they're not front stoops, and so I'm putting a caveat there, but they also feel like they speak to Dana, to Pearl, to McGrath. Eventually McGrath being a boulevard type transit-oriented street, it feels like that corner has a little bit more interaction between residents and it's outside. So I agree with Paul, maybe we explore that side entrance more, but we were very much thinking about these things that you're mentioning, which I appreciate in our design, whether they were executed or not.
Yeah.
The intent was definitely there.
I think that you're getting a lot of this reaction, Paul, because even if you go to the side, right, this is the side entrance and it's the important part of it, but the development of detail of that, like there's a little cantilever out that signifies a canopy, but we know that that's not going to be exactly it, right? It would be either additional structure, be a little thicker. So I think that there's a lot of information that's missing to tell the full story, I guess, of the intent of it, right? So I think that if the story was fully complete, like showing all of the facades and showing the development of this entry and how great it is and how the canopy is being held by the building and attached to the building, I think it would help the selling of the story and of your form. But I think that you have one shot that is this, the top shot that you show that has a lot of the story, but I think that your building needs to have views, and you need to just tell us at every side what's happening and how it's developed. And I think that it's missing that, and that's why I think perhaps some of the committee members and myself are having to struggle with that. So I think that is just a secondary level of development that it needs for the story to just like come through, right? Some light fixtures, some structure for the canopy. What is the material of that fence? What is it a wood fence? Is it a brick fence? Is it a metal fence? I think that it would help further develop this a little bit more, to sell on the idea that this is an iconic corner and there's things happening on all of these facades, and that the entry on this side works because X,
Yeah.
because of this,
Yeah, that all makes sense.
I think this is a really good conversation.
It is.
I agree with all of it. And I think to add to that, I think the architecture of this elevation, the west elevation of the building, feels perhaps less developed than any of the other three sides. And I think that's contributing to this feeling like a side or back of the building. It's
Yeah.
not the extent of that blank area there. I appreciate that the windows were sketched in on the north side. That helps there. This is a big expanse of blank area here. And I think some further definition here, whether it's maybe a step in the elevation, maybe the stair can push in a little farther. I know it's eating a little more out of your building volume. You're already tight, but is it something that breaks this facade a little? Is there an opportunity to add another window somewhere that stacks, that may stagger, something else that helps?
Yeah, that all makes sense. And I agree, this facade is undercooked compared to the other ones and could use a little bit more attention.
Yeah, the exciting forms are facing the other two streets. You've got, I don't know whether it's, it's a carve in or a push out around the entry, that could help tie it, to make this face the part of the language that you're using on the other two faces. And, the railing, I look at the railing and it just feels like, maybe it helps define, maybe that whole entry is more, there's a solid rail, not something that is open the way it is, and it creates, an outdoor room or something. And there's more definition to it. I wish there was a tree behind, sort of closing behind the fence there, or something like that, brought the eye further back and a soft termination too, because you are using landscaping and growing things, to punctuate the building. So, yeah, so I think it's an interesting thing that needs to advance.
Mm-hmm. Deborah, did you mean somewhere back here, the tree?
Yep, exactly.
But to that point too, it would
I
also
don't know if
be
there's
good.
enough for,
Yeah, to Deborah's point too, though, like you're using the landscape, the sort of green growing down the building. It'd be great to see this rendering without that, because that's the reality of what this building looked like. Is that chunk of metal too much without that green coming down?
You mean on the front?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And before the architects go, like, to me, I think one of the challenges with the existing building is that it does feel really contextless. I think the other building that you guys presented at assembly, I really liked, and it's really cool. The building that you guys are replacing feels out of scale. It feels weird. It's bad. Thank you for taking it away. But this kind of just feels contextless to me in a different direction. And I get the subtle cues. I get the corrugated is picking up on this and bumping out the building is a bay window. But like if when you step back, and if you were to step back and pop this into that neighborhood, I think Sherry's kind of pointing it out in her letter, but it does feel like it's been sort of dropped in from nowhere. And I have a hard time kind of understanding how this fits in a neighborhood, and how it I'm not saying blends because it doesn't need to blend, but it feels to me still like there's, I don't know, it feels very out of place in this position. And I will let the architects disagree with me. So
I think you're onto something, and it's something I kind of felt in looking at this too. I appreciate the form of the building. I think there's some dynamism on this corner, which is good. The arrangement of the balconies is good. The orientation is good. The kind of sculptural carved volume is interesting. So maybe I come back to the materiality. Is there a way that this form could become more conceptual through further development of materiality? One example I thought of when looking at this for the first time was the Central Square Theater, which is a corrugated metal profile. I think it's more of a bronze color, more of kind of a gold bronze color, but it's a very tight profile. It's not like a 4-inch wide corrugation or something. It's kind of a very fine grain texture. And I think we talk a lot about, especially when we're talking about cementitious panels, the detailing being really important to the execution of the idea. I think with this building, the detailing is going to be really, really important. I mean, this could feel like a mechanical penthouse on the top of a lab building, or it could feel like a kind of a beautiful sculptured jewel box here. It's something more like Central Square Theater. So I'd love to maybe when this comes back, hear a little more about material specific products that you're thinking of for the cladding, and whether there are specific color options that you're looking at.
Sure. Yeah, we can look into that more. We are looking at it. I guess I didn't write it here. It's a Morin metal panel. It's a specific product. This is it comes in a 12-inch wide panel.
So
Clips
those are
in.
4-inch. Those are 4-inch.
Yep.
Loops. Yeah, I wonder about the scale. That's a big.
Yeah, we have a sample in our office. I hear you on the detail. It's going to be critical, and we wouldn't accept a mechanical penthouse. I mean, I know that the purpose of this commission is to make sure that it doesn't become that. For what it's worth, it would not be acceptable to us either. To me, it's a nice product. Even at 4 inches, it's rigid enough that you're not seeing oil canning or anything in it. And the thing I liked about 4 inches, I mentioned earlier in the presentation, is that it has that clapboard. One typical dimension of clapboard is 4 inches.
Yeah. But the projection is the overlap on a clapboard is a 1/2 inch. This is projecting probably
an inch. Yeah.
So I don't know. I wonder if it's worth thinking about. Is there a 2-inch? Is it worth just evaluating side by side? Thinking about what's right in terms of this at a scale of the whole building. I also wonder, so I think how it meets the ground is going to be important as well. And having a water course, I totally agree with that. I think that's important to document as well. I wonder, did you explore with this form changing the entire materiality of the first floor up to having it be different in the upper 2 levels?
I mean, kind of in this brick one. We didn't with the metal panel, but this is a colored brick showing a purple here with the white on top. Same form though, same massing.
But if I understood Tim's point, Tim, did I understand you right? You were talking about a material change, not a color change? potentially?
Yeah, well, in the other option, that's what I was asking. I think this
Okay.
basically gets to what material change would result in if it was different than the other two stories. I'm not sure that's the right solution. I think overall, out of the three options, my preference is for one.
Yeah, I think
That's preferred option.
Yeah, I think the second one, and actually the second one looks like a painted ground floor. You know, there's no plane changes, no, the volume, it sort of, I think it compromises the form of it. And I think this one, I'm also concerned about the aluminum. I like, Tim, your suggestion of, or I don't know if you were suggesting it, but looking at a metal, it could still be a metal that is a little warmer, like it is, like a bronze could be beautiful. And I sort of like that mint. I feel like in the winter, to Andrew's point, to me, that's part of what's gonna distinguish this. And I wish it appeared again, maybe around the entry or in some way. I mean, I know it's used as the carved inside stuff, but it's what makes you look at the gray differently. And it's something that in the winter, it will give this project, relief. So it could maybe be used a little more intensely.
One thing to explore could be just the height of that water course and whether that's a more distinct material change. There was a darker stone at the base, for example, and it carried up to the sill of the windows and kind of the bottom of the balcony, wrapped around the building. Might help both with durability, long-term durability, but also how the building comes down and meets the ground, how this form terminates. And then I've got one more comment, just on the roof. Right now it is a blank roof, but Somerville does have a green roof ordinance. It'll be required to have a green roof. So it would be good to understand what that roof looks like, whether there's PV green roof, and any mechanical equipment that go up there.
Thanks for pointing that out. We'll have to look at that ordinance and educate ourselves about what that requires. That's separate from the zoning code?
No, it's in the zoning code.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't provide the citation, but it was done as one of the amendments in 2023.
Okay. We might not have the right.
Requires 80% of the roof area to be green roof, but exempts areas for required mechanical equipment and also areas for photovoltaics. So it gives you some flexibility to determine how to arrange those different elements on the roof.
And Paul, do you know, or we might have to check with our code consultant, can we have a green roof that's non-technically occupiable? Because I mean, if that's fine, I'd much rather have a green roof anyways.
Yeah, it'll have to be accessible through a roof hatch because it cannot be accessible to tenants, residents. But the purpose of the green roof in the ordinance is for its environmental properties, I assume.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
See them.
All right. I am gonna go out on a limb here. I heard from at least two of the commissioners sounding as though we might be able to take a vote on the preferred massing and facade direction this evening. So I'd like to know if you are willing to do that, or if you would like the project to come back in its entirety with the elevation changes and a lot of the further investigations that you've suggested?
I'm comfortable with making a recommendation for option 1.
I second that.
Okay, so I heard that as a motion by Deborah.
Of course.
With a second by Frank, to accept option 1 as the preferred massing and facade choice. So with that, we'll do a roll call vote. Frank,
Yes.
Andrew,
No.
Deborah,
Yes.
and Tim.
Yes.
All right, so let the record show we have 3 votes to 1. And then, given the amount of discussion that we've had this evening, do I have a motion to continue this project to the next meeting?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
All right, so moved by Andrew, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote. Frank,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
and Tim.
Yes.
All right, thank you, team. Currently, please stay tuned, work with your planner. The next scheduled meeting is September 24th for your information.
Great, thank you. And thanks
Thanks
for
for
all the
the-
comments. I think we can make some nice improvements based on this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. It was great.
All right. All right, our next project, well, I'm trying to click away in the background, is where are we? 33 Mystic Avenue. So I probably shouldn't have unloaded the team if I am if I am correct. Sorry, hold on, Paul. I'll bring you right back. Sorry about this, folks. Had a momentary lapse of reason there. All right. Hello. All right, I'm still not seeing Paul. There we are.
Okay, I'm back. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right, and you are remade co-host.
Great.
I do want to just remind you that you have 20 minutes to present. Remind the commission that you did vote at the August 13th meeting that preferred option, facade option 1 was approved. So this evening, we just need to vote on design guidelines and any additional, whether the design guidelines have been met and any additional design guideline guidance you would like to provide.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so the way we organize this is basically just kind of cut to run through comment by comment from last time and try to address everything that came up. We also had a couple of thoughts ourselves on the design as we were revising it, and we'll go through those point by point as well. So the first thing that was brought up were the brick and the glass colors, and just a kind of pointing out that we want to be cautious about not going too dark with our the darker colored brick that we have selected here, which is Endicott's manganese iron spot. And we did take a second look at it along with some other options, and we still feel like it's our preferred option, but we do have a few more sort of backup options, some alternates, which we would be happy with. And what we'd like to propose is that we, for our own use, create a visual mock-up on site so that we can see the color of the brick through the day in different light and just make sure that we're satisfied with manganese iron spot. But again, we feel like it's still the right color and tone for this particular site. And we're also cognizant of the glass coating, making sure that we select a glass coating that doesn't make the windows appear too dark. That can also be part of our VMU process. Okay, and then the second comment was about the ventilation system. Frank very helpfully pointed out that the ERV in the EFOCA all-in-one is not Passive House US certified. And we were able to confirm that is true. Thank you, because we probably wouldn't have found that out until later otherwise. So we're adding a separate ERV, standalone ERV, and integrating the supply and return air vents into the facade language. And so what we're doing is, instead of the spherical vents that we had shown last time, or the round vents, we're creating a kind of narrow louvered panel in aluminum that matches the color of the windows. That allows us to have both the supply and return vents for the EFOCA unit with an ERV, separate ERV, return air and exhaust air above that. And so it kind of integrates it neatly into the facade language without having vents all over the place. And then the supplies for the standalone ERV are on the Mystic Avenue facade. You can see those here. 2 per unit in general. Okay, so that's ventilation. Okay, number 3 was the design of the lot line walls. There was a concern, kind of question about whether they could be made to be more interesting. Where we could, we've added openings. I want to go to here. So I'll start here on the stairwell wall facing I-93. There we've added windows into the stairwell. On the lot line side of that wall, because it's a 0 lot line condition, we can't have any openings per the building code, but we thought it would be fun to kind of show what's going on behind that wall with the language that's similar to lintel and brick. And so there's a little bit, maybe an inch of relief between this concrete, precast concrete, sort of like lintel, and the recessed brick that sort of diagrams the path of the stairs and the elevator. Just gives it some movement and shows what's actually happening behind that wall. So you can see that above on the north east facing side, and here below on the southwest facing side. Okay, elevator overrun. I think Frank, someone asked about the elevator overrun, just checking to make sure that that was tall enough, and it was not quite tall enough by only a few feet. But you can see that difference here on the right side, upper right side, in the northeast facade, and then on the southeast facade in the bottom image here. Here we, just so you guys know, we added an extra step that's not really, it's purely kind of for the massing. That first step is just because we liked the way that it looked, and then you're seeing a step up to the vestibule that opens onto the roof, and then a final step up here to the elevator bulkhead. Okay, point 5 was a question about integrating the streetscape design with the future Mystic Avenue design that's shown in the proposed neighborhood plan. And so we took another look at that. You'll see later in the presentation, Curtis is going to go through a section drawing that shows how the streetscape design, our proposed streetscape design, integrates with the future Mystic Ave cycle track. Point 6 was I believe Tim asked about this blank spot on the facade. We took another look at that and we felt like he was right, that that is better with a window there. So we've added it in this revised version, added a window there. And then a couple of thoughts from us. We thought it was important to have the wider entrance on North Union Street that was shown in our previous scheme 3. And so we widened the primary scheme entrance to match what's going on here. So it's not a material change, but just making it a more prominent entrance on the street. And you'll see that in some, we'll do it now. So this was the approved design direction, and we're suggesting that we make it wider like this. And then the final kind of thought from us was just that we liked the dynamic massing in scheme 3, not referring to the color material here, just that it had a little bit more presence on this corner. I think similar to Pearl Street, but maybe even more so here. This site really has a presence on Mystic Avenue and on I-93, and we think it's an opportunity to create a really dynamic, exciting looking building as you're entering into the Assembly Square neighborhood from Boston. And so we didn't want to miss an opportunity there to do something interesting with the massing. And so what you're seeing here on the right side in this revised design is taking that curving kind of stepping language and bringing it into the parapet design, into the massing a little bit here with a small cantilever that creates some balconies off the primary suite of the upper floors. And then on the, I'm going to go, this is looking south on North Union Street. I think creates even more kind of depth and visual interest from this side of the building. That's it. Those were the, I think all the points that were brought up last time. And then, sorry, the landscape. Curtis, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Yeah, so this was, just as a refresher, this was a landscape plan presented previously. 5 street trees, sort of a sculptural bench that sort of interrupts the planters and creates some interest in the streetscape. Some bike racks, a bench, and if we advance forward, we'll see what that Mystic Ave streetscape looks like with the bike. Yeah, we'll just skip through that. So yeah, so this was our understanding of what's in store for Mystic Ave, a 2-way elevated cycle track. And with that, I believe it's a 3-foot buffer between the traffic and the cyclists. So there we are in plan and section, and we took the liberty of showing some extra street trees, you know, along that Mystic Ave streetscape there. Yeah, and just as a refresher of the roof space there, just a sort of traditional deck with a, you know, a sort of wild pollinator green roof around it.
Okay, I think that's the updates from us, and we're happy to take questions and comments.
Well, I've got a couple of specific comments, but I think in general, these are all improvements. I appreciate the effort to address all of the different comments and those that were made. The entry is a significant improvement from this time too, so appreciate you including that as well. And the kind of the definition of the lighter color piece of that that's very interesting. I think that could be a really dynamic and interesting and expressive part of this building. The only piece of it that I think is a little, could probably, I mean, you'll play with the proportion of the depth of the stair, rising, travel, all that. But the piece which tucks under the cantilever piece, kind of a
I know.
lighter colored piece and the darker colored pieces intersect. Yeah, I'm sure you've.
We really, to be honest, we're flip-flopping about that. There's some debate about what was the right move there, whether it was bringing the brick through or not, or doing what we're showing here. There's a kitchen in the studios behind this wall, and so we're using that same lintel, call it lintel language, to show that one kind of kitchen behind it.
Right.
But I'm not totally convinced it's right yet either, and we're probably going to continue tweaking that as we develop the design.
We had a version with the brick that was, I thought was nice as well.
What's the white material?
Do you mean the part
Both,
that's
I guess.
textured or not?
I get
So
both. I guess it's good.
yeah, so we're looking at a sand-colored Flemish bond brick here, so you get some nice shadowing on the brick, and then this would be precast concrete.
So a precast concrete
Yep.
and a white brick.
Not all the way to white. I think it's important that it's kind of sand colored, and then that the concrete's a little bit less saturated.
Where is the wood?
The wood?
Yeah, it says wood cedar.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think we lined the entrance with it, Paul.
We did in one of the schemes, and then it fell off of this one.
Off, yeah.
Yeah, I think that this would work really well lined. Oh, there it is. It's on the back wall here. But I think we could line the whole entrance in wood. I think that would be really nice.
Is it real wood in your mind?
It's either cedar. We've been using this product called Acre recently, which is upcycled rice hulls, and it has a grain like wood. It weathers gray like wood. It's really nice.
Yeah, the weathering of wood in this environment sometimes is like, you know, if it's not done well, it just ends up making your building look bad.
I
know,
agree.
so-
I can't stand when I drive around and look at what was new wood 2 years ago.
Exactly. So, I mean, I like the idea that it's a warm color, that it's a wood-like material. I would just say that to just look into it to make sure that it's not something that in like 3 years is going to have like stains and it's going to look bad, you know.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, it's sheltered. And it's got
It is sheltered. You're correct, Tim. It is sheltered. But...
One other comment. Can you talk a little more about the ERV? Is that the exhaust, that kind of vertical, rectangular openings?
Talk a little bit more about the mechanical design or the facade design associated with
the
it.
Facade design specifically.
Okay. So the ERV requires separate exhaust air and supply air. And because the EFOCA heating and cooling unit also has a couple vents associated with it, we wanted to minimize the number of penetrations in the facade and simplify the visual language a little bit. And so the idea here was creating this narrow louvered panel that allows those exhausts to sit behind it without cluttering up the facade. Does that answer the question?
I think so. So those are, is there an intake and an exhaust portion of that?
It's all just going to be built out as a kind of single facade panel, like just a custom louvered grill. I also am curious about perforated, just something that's been in the back of my mind as another option, but a metal panel that looks intentional, like it's part of the facade rather than having separate vents. So this up high would be the exhaust for ERV. That sits above, runs in above the Effica unit, and then these two down here are the Effica supply and exhaust. And those don't actually provide condition. They're not fresh air intake. They are used to as part of the internal mechanism.
Yeah, it's for the unit.
Yeah. So this fresh air comes from this side of the building, and those we do like just keeping the spherical vents same color match to the window frame.
Yeah, I think the dark brick will actually help with concealing those.
Oh,
The rectangular opening, they feel prominent. I mean, I don't know if it's just the rendering, I don't know if it's the reality of how.
Is
feel.
yeah, and Sarah, can I ask, is a mock-up required on this?
As you see fit.
I would say that it would be interesting to see as we do for large buildings. It's an elegant building, Paul, and we like it, and we would hate for it to just go in the wrong direction. And I think that I would like to see a mock-up at least of the materiality and how these, in more particular, how the exhausts work with the brick, and to have that detail so that we would be capable of seeing it. I think it would be good to request that. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I would like to see the treatment of the louver with the brick.
Let me ask you a clarification. So there's a lot of times we have a two-step process that we've done before. One is actual material samples for your review prior to building permit, and then the mock-up panel prior to full vertical construction. Would you like both of those?
I mean, I think that the mock-up, yeah, sure. I would say yes. It would be good to see the materials, but I would like to see the one thing that I want to make sure that is done properly and correctly is the fresh air intake and the exhaust with the brick and some of the white as well. The brick. It would just be good to just see those components in some type of a mock-up so that we get to at least see it. And if there's anything that is just, because we're going to be seeing a lot more and more of this. You know, the Epoca is a pretty interesting product that I think a lot of people are going to be using.
Yeah, hopefully Passive House US approves their ERVs soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we would. I mean, I think we would like to see it also. So I don't see any. I'd be excited by both mock-ups or material and then a mock-up.
I think when we've done it prior to a building permit, it's been, I don't think it's been in person. We've done virtual reviews of the basic material palette and key construction details. So I think something like this to just do, if it's prior to building permit, it's just virtual and the construction detail.
So you would be okay with high resolution photographs of the material palette?
Yeah, but I think for the 3 brick options for that, that would be great to see in person, the actual brick.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that in the before days. And we would collect them at City Hall for you to come by as the commission has time availability. So we can certainly do that.
So my suggestion for these openings is going to be to look at perhaps integrating it with the window, so it does appear more of a single opening with maybe a solid side panel and then the vision glazed window next to it. Yeah, and just eliminating that kind of narrow slit
Yeah.
brick in between.
Yep. It's better.
You know, you can play with the patterning and the frame of the window and how that all works together, because it really wants it to go like an integrated piece. It would just need less individual.
Hmm.
Probably simpler brickwork too.
I'm gonna jump in just so we can keep this train rolling.
Yep.
I think the landscape plan is really nice. No comments on that, and I appreciate showing the integration with the bike rack. I really appreciate making the front entry bigger. That makes a lot of sense. I think the additional windows is great. I think it's a really, really elegant building. I think the only parts that I question a little bit, there was something really clean about the single datum at the top of the building, that the stepped, I don't know, it seems cleaner in the approved direction without the stepping. And it would be great to see some alternate versions of the patterning in the cement and the white or the sand colored brick as well. I kind of get what you guys are doing, trying to break that down. And I can see the staircase elevator thing, but it might be a little bit subtle for kind of the lay person to pick up on that, and be nice to understand if there's other options in terms of patterning that could be added using that same toolkit. That's it. Good job.
Concur.
I wasn't a part of the first discussion, I don't think, at least I don't remember. But I do think that most of these things are improvements from, looking at the before and after. So I think this was, except, the comments that were made. And I think the Endicott brick, I know, and I think it gets because it's so specular, it doesn't appear dark, in most lights. So, I think it may be fine, but it would be good to see it at the site. So those are my comments. Nice job.
You ready to take a vote on this?
Yep, let's roll.
Yep. Let's roll.
All right, so first I need a motion as to whether the commission believes the design guidelines have been met.
So motioned.
Motion by Andrew, seconded by Frank. Roll call vote. Frank,
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And the next vote is the specific design guidance that we would like to provide. I have a couple of notes. I just want to make sure that I have them all as you've discussed them. The side elevation with at the elevator and the stairs. Perhaps look at alternate patterning on that elevation where the concrete and white brick are shown. The HVAC intake and exhaust that are clustered behind the louvered panel should be incorporated into the window openings they're adjacent to. There was some caution issued about the weathering of real wood. So consider the material selection for the cedar. And then the commission would like to have conditioned as part of the recommendation for the planning board material samples be submitted prior to building permit for, and those are real samples for in-person review. And then a mock-up panel be provided on site to most importantly see the brick and how the vents work with the brick. Is there anything else that any of you would like to add?
I think just continuing to refine the intersection of the dark and white brick above the lobby entry.
All right. So do I need to repeat that again, or can we assume that that was a good summary for a motion?
It's a good summary for it.
Excellent. So thank you, Frank, for motioning. Can I get a second?
Second,
Seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote. Frank,
Yes.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Deborah
yes.
and Tim.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, team.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll,
Thank
All
you.
right, now, before I click anything else, Paul, can I unpromote you now?
I think we're done for tonight, but yes, thank you. Thanks to the commission for your feedback tonight. It's been really helpful.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. All right, so the next item on our agenda is, I just unpromoted Andrew. I'm having no luck with my clicking this evening. Okay. All right, so the next item this evening is Assembly Square Block 9.
Is Paul Miller still on?
That is a good question. It certainly looks like it, probably because I unclicked Andrew instead of Paul. All right, there we go.
Hurtful, Sarah.
I swear you shouldn't let middle-aged women occupy, operate technology like this. So if I can get the team from.
Well, so I need to recluse myself, so I'm out.
All right, so noted. Thank you. Frank is recused from this project. Have a good evening, Frank. If I could get the Block 9 folks to raise their hand, so they can be promoted. This is a general building and assembly. For the record, the commission is aware, this is slightly different for assembly, that there's only one concept required, and there are different guidelines under assembly. So this conversation will be probably slightly different than some of the others, and I just wanted to let our audience, make our audience aware of that. All right, hopefully. Good evening, Patrick.
Good evening.
Oh, and Peter. Okay, there we go. Hello. Kristen, are you going to be presenting? So you need the to share slides, or who will be sharing slides?
Yes, I'll be sharing the slides, but Patrick McMahon from Federal Realty is going to start us off speaking. Would you like me to start sharing my slides now?
Just a second. I just needed to know who to give permission to. All right, there we go. We should be set.
Okay.
Thank you all for your patience.
Sure.
The floor
And
is
while
yours,
Kristen's
Patrick.
bringing that up- Oh, great. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks to the commission for having us tonight. We're excited to present this project. My name is Patrick McMahon. I'm with Federal Realty. We've got a number of team members here tonight. Our design team is led by Demilla Schaefer, and as we go through the presentation, each one of those folks will introduce themselves. You may recognize Sarah Rogers from our team. She is our project lead. I'm pinch hitting for her tonight. So I will quickly give a very broad overview, and then I'm going to turn it over very fast to Kristen and the design team to get into the details. So with that, as Kristen, I think, is probably still pulling up the slides. Oh, great, there they are. As a quick primer, we're here to present tonight our proposal for 318 rental apartment units over ground floor retail space in an 8-story building. Total square footage in the building is approximately 370,000 square feet over ground floor retail. This will be, you'll see in a moment, and I'll just really quickly locate us here, both in terms of what you're now seeing on the screen, but you'll see several site plans here in a moment. Our Block 9, which is we call Block 9, it's a block that's bound by Grand Union and Foley Street. It's adjacent to Biomed's new lab building. If you've been to Assembly recently, you certainly have seen that new lab building as it's been erected. So thanks, Kristen. She's now showing the screen of the site plan where Block 9 sits. Kristen, if you don't mind going back one, I can quickly run through the stats on the project. As I said, in total, I think we're looking at approximately 370,000 gross square feet, 318 rental housing units that range in size or range in bedroom count from studios 1 to 2 bedrooms. We do intend to comply with the current zoning requirement of 20% affordability. Thank you to Sarah Lewis, who originally or at the outset of this reminded folks that we, because of our originally planned PUD master plan, we are grandfathered into the zoning that was in place in 2019. That said, we intend to comply, though, with today's requirement of 20% affordability. You can see there that both bicycle and car parking, we intend to park the project at just under half, meaning half in terms of the count of overall parking spaces to units and the overall bike parking spaces to units. As I said earlier, we intend to have ground floor retail space primarily located along Grand Union, Foley, and then as it turns down Harold Cohen Way. We are in the process right now of talking to several different daycare providers. It's a use that we have long sought and the community has long sought over at Assembly that we do not yet have. To be sure, MGB does have a daycare center, but I think from day one, they've been oversubscribed or over capacity there. So our hope is that we are able to procure a daycare center at some point during construction so that when we open, we've got one that can open with the residential units. In terms of environmental sustainability, we have designed this building to be LEED Gold certified. Our previous 2 residential projects are both LEED Gold certified. We intend also, or rather we are designing a building in compliance with Passive House, which we're excited about. This will be our first Passive House building. And as noted at the bottom of the screen, we've got a proposed height of 85 feet. So That, if you've been to Assembly, even in the past 4 to 5 years, you're probably familiar with the building that's shown on block 20, I believe it's 22, the Alta Revolution building. It's approximately the same height. So again, thanks Sarah, or thanks Kristen for circling that. You can see block 9 squarely located in the middle of the neighborhood. To be sure, what you're looking at in terms of an overall neighborhood master plan is our master plan that we endeavored to undertake as part of the neighborhood planning process. So what you aren't seeing on this master plan is what's there today at the marketplace, where we've got Trader Joe's and TJ Maxx. That is indeed our intention or our hope for the future of that parcel. So this gives you sort of a look at, you know, knock on wood, where we hope to be in 10, 15, 20 years from now. The other important item, to note on this diagram or on this site plan is we've included a couple buffer zones from the highway. We know that the 300-foot and the 500-foot buffer zones are important to folks in the community and at the city. So you can see that block 9 is squarely located outside both buffer zones. So with that, again, wanted to give just a very high-level overview, and with that, I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm Kristen McDougall, the project manager with DeMille Schaefer for this project. It's good to be with you tonight. I'll make one note on this plan, which might not be immediately evident, and that's that our site here is in purple, and then the buildings that are in white are ones that are in future development, and then the ones that are grayed out, those are existing. So this slide highlights the major access ways to the point or to the site. Cars access via Grand Union in 2 directions, Revolution Drive, and also Foley Street. For T-Riders, they will also access from Foley Street, but from the opposite end. And it creates sort of a natural hub here at the corner of Grand Union Boulevard and Foley Street. Here you can see the current Block 9 site. It is surrounded by buildings of varying heights, from 85 feet to 250 feet. That includes the Alta Revolution directly to the south of our site at 85 feet, and Biomed, which is across the street to the west at 225 feet. The Block 9 development will stay on the low end of that scale, matching the 85-foot height and general configuration of Alta, the multifamily development next door. Our buildings program is broken out into lobby, amenity, and retail on the first level, parking on the second, and residential units above on levels 3 through 8. So now I'll get into the plan layout. Once again, bringing back this overall site plan, master plan. What I wanted to highlight here is that Harold Cohen Way is envisioned by the city and by Federal Realty as a very pedestrian-oriented street, as opposed to Grand Union, which is much more car-oriented. The vision is for Harold Cohen to feel a little bit more like Assembly Row, with pedestrians as the main focus. There is a plan for a WUNRF condition here on Harold Cohen, 1 block away from our site in front of the future Assembly Innovation Park. So while our initial instinct was to place the main entrance to the building at this hub of Foley Street and Grand Union Boulevard, in the end, we decided to place it on Harold Cohen Way in order to support the city's long-term vision for the street. Here's our ground level plan. So you can see the main entrance we have here on Harold Cohen Way. And we have our lobby and amenities here, animating the public realm and creating a connection to the Innovation Park. Oh, let me go back. Then around on Foley Street, this is where we would have our retail, ideally daycare tenant, with a dedicated outdoor play area for the kids. Moving around to Grand Union Boulevard, we have a secondary convenience entrance here. There's an existing bus stop here. As you move towards Auto Workers Way, we start to see some of the back of house programming, like the transformer vault, electrical rooms, and our generator will actually be up on the roof. Once you get to Auto Workers Way, we worked really hard to co-locate all of our parking ingress, egress, our trash, and our loading onto this one street, which is already functioning as sort of a back alley for Alta Revolution here. They also have all of their loading and parking on this street. So we are matching that nature. On the second floor, we have our parking and some additional back of house spaces. And finally, on levels 3 through 8, we have our mix of studios, 1-bedrooms, and 2-bedroom units. On the third level, we will have some additional amenity space for the residents and also a courtyard. And with that, I will turn it over to Sapir Ng. He is our lead designer on the project, and he'll talk a little bit about massing and materiality.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everyone. We have looked at precedents around Assembly Square and other projects. Here's just some examples. The one on the top left shows we can use architectural elements and lighting to create a marker of a corner. And the top right-hand image showing you can use massing to anchor the block and also express the entrance of the building. And the bottom one showing how you can use stairs and different elements to divide up the blocks and create different rhythms of the building. Next question. And in the planned unit development, there is really no obvious, front and back of the block. We have looked at the Assembly Square master plan and studied the adjacent buildings and identify different corners of the building to address their relationship to the streets and public space around. Grand Union and Foley Streets are major connecting arteries in the district. Grand Union runs north and south, and Foley is the access to and from the T station. We determined this corner at Grand Union and Foley as the primary corner of the project. On the other side is the Harold Cohen Way, which is a different nature and is envisioned as the more pedestrian oriented corridor, where our main entrance is going to be located. So we considered this corner on Harold Cohen Way facing the future Innovation Park as the secondary corner. Next, please. We use these principles as well as architectural elements such as balconies, stairs, and unit modules to help differentiate and break down the massing of the building. Next, please. These are some renderings showing the primary corner from Foley Street and Grand Union Boulevard. We use larger scale windows, grouping vertically, larger scale cladding materials with textures, and larger openings with balconies on the corner. We use the entrance on this side to divide up the building along the long facade, and bring the same expression all the way up to indicate the entrance. Next, please. Moving on to the other end of Grand Union Boulevard with Outer Revolution on the left-hand side, we have a large, we use a horizontal expression on this part of the block. The first 2 floors, we also have large-scale graphic artwork on the metal panel, and this would be the back of house mechanical. Some of them would be the mechanical area. Next, please. Here's the secondary corner facing Harold Cohen Way and the Innovation Park, and we envision the future. Things the buildings all built up, that could have activities like this. And this corner is similar to the primary corner, but it's different because it's a secondary corner, and as the top is leading from the other corner into this park. And from this side, you can see the opening to the main entrance in there, and also the amenity space beyond. Next, please. Here's back to Foley Street looking into the main entrance. We use a setback and also use a material underlying on the inside, a warmer material to have the double height space for either future healthcare or retail space. And the setback and the material draw you into the main entrance of the building. And also at the corner, we have larger balconies. And on this side also has the horizontal expression. It's a weaving of the both horizontal and vertical. And here's a night view showing what it would look like along Foley Street and looking into the main entrance of the building. Next, please. And here's a close-up to the main entrance. And we use a warmer material and have wood patterns. And also on the left side, you can see would be the daycare play area. And if it's a retail option, and that would be the outdoor seating for the retail. And next. And here's the material palette concept. And from the massing study, we have different corners, and we use the scale of 3 cementitious material to differentiate these corners. And for the larger corner, we use the larger scale cementitious material and has the texture. And also we have the medium-sized cementitious material in the beige color in the back, and it's the panels. And on the top part of the building, we have horizontal patterns, cementitious material in smaller scale. And we also have accent metal panels, and with 2 different colors. And you can see in between the windows openings, and also part of the garage cladding. We have pattern, form metal panels and with different colors to create patterns on the garage enclosure. And we also have the painted metal panels as graphic on the first 2 floors of the garage. And next, and we'll hand it to landscape.
Hi, yeah, great. So I'm Amy Houghton, and I'm the landscape architect with Jeff Hodgson from Wagner Hodgson Landscape Architecture. So I'll lead through this. And so as you can see, the site plan here, identifying the streetscapes, and really the design of this was based on accommodating the building program and the needs of the building, as well as tying into the surrounding development by integrating a similar landscape language that was set forth by the master plan. But more specifically, it really builds off the landscape character and systems of the adjacent Biomed and Alta Revolution blocks, so that we could create a cohesive streetscape, moving forward. this streetscape might seem a little bit different than what's happening east of Grand Union, but we felt it was very important to really create that unified landscape here. So some of the landscape features and systems that we've integrated from the neighborhood are really the bus and vehicular drop-offs, one on Grand Union and the vehicular drop-off on Harold Cohen. Also the parking garage and loading dock entries on Auto Worker Way. Also the bikeway along Foley Street, as well as really integrating that pedestrian connector along Harold Cohen Way, as well as, you know, the accessible routes around the entire project. As you can see, it's in the lighter concrete zone. We also have these tree belts that you'll see along all the edge of the street with raised planters to really provide some protection between the pedestrian and the vehicular movement, as well as some raised planters against the building to provide some nice pedestrian zones, and also seating occurs in that location, as well as looking at lighting around the whole site as well. Next slide, we can go through the detail of each, I guess, each street. And starting with Foley, this is one of the larger streets, as we have the retail, it's sort of known as the retail, as well as the bikeway street. So having a raised pedestrian median, it's just a 6-inch curb between the bikeway, which is the white line, and the pedestrian movement. We felt that was important just from a safety standpoint, and really trying to show those, separating that pedestrian zone into that accessible way, as well as we're calling it a furniture, and it's a walk zone up against the building, and really creating 2 different materials so that it helps decrease the size of that pavement, and so it's not as overwhelming. The idea there in that furniture zone is really to have those benches and planters in that zone, and really looking at putting those close to the entries to the building, as you can see is marked in the more peach locations, which is, yeah, you can see there and further down the page as well. And really locating those benches and the bike racks that are right out front, close to those entries, so for easy access. There's also, as you can see, certain images that we're trying to achieve with unit pavers, and really carrying that's Foley Street at the Biomed building, but carrying that character through. So continue on to Grand Union. So moving to Grand Union, this is a more, it's a busy road, and it's where the bus stops ends, stops here, as well as there's access into utility vaults within the building. So there's a large curb cut at that location, but in order to, again, separate the pedestrian zone from Grand Union, we've been able to get that raised planter with street trees and lighting, as well as perennials and some shrubs. As you can see in that zone, again, that furniture zone adjacent to the 5-foot wide accessible way, in order to give some more character and provide amenities along the streetscape. Also, there's a step-off zone right at the street, so just to allow people to get out of the way if they needed to. Moving on. Looking at Auto Workers Way, again, as Kristen mentioned, this is sort of the service and loading zone. So really providing curb cuts to access those program elements of the building, but then also a 6-foot wide planting strip raised, again, that would hold shrubs and perennials, and as well as lighting along that street to give character to the building. And again, noting that accessible way with the concrete, and then probably some kind of special paver along the edge, just to break down the scale of that walk. And just looking at precedent images, as you can see here, achieving those type of landscape elements. Yeah, they're showing a bollard at the corner of Harold Cohen Way, as we're going to be intercepting people from the future Innovation Park to the right of the page. So moving on to Harold Cohen Way. Really, as I mentioned, the idea here is to take that continuity from the Innovation Park and carrying it down to the river and really creating this pedestrian corridor and greenway through our site and use that as the beginning connector out towards the river. And as you can see here, we have a series of benches and planters up against the building that complement the amenity spaces inside, and an open entry of special paving and unipaving, and as well as benches and bike racks, locating them close to the entrance for access and to activate that entry. Again, having that raised planter along the street edge is very important to give that pedestrian protection, and as well as allow for some more green space along that corridor. As you can see, we're looking at a variety of different planters that we might be able to use. The idea of these linear benches and linear planters that they've also used across the street. We were trying to, include that similar language just to really create this unified greenway and pedestrian corridor through our site. Next, I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions?
I guess just one question. So there was sort of talk about primary, secondary, and I think I heard early on the main entrance is on Harold Cohen. The entrance that we're looking right now is still an entry to the building, but it's considered secondary.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And Andrew, I'm pretty sure that some of your Copley Wolf team, if not you yourself, worked on a lot of the landscaping for the Biomed and Alta buildings that are around. And, we wanted to sort of mirror the same type of feeling. We're not trying to recreate the wheel here on the other side of the street.
Hey, I have one quick question along that. So there was reference, Amy, you had referenced planters effectively at the street trees. Are those curb height or are they something taller for the street trees?
At the street edge, they would be a 6-inch curb.
Just curb height. Okay.
There might be some conditions of grading where it might be a little less than 12 inches. So that just sort of plays as the grading next to the bikeway. But I think most of the area is just 6 inches.
Thank you.
Just to provide some protection to those plantings.
Tim, Deborah, anything from either of you?
Yeah, I do have a question about the relief that you get between implied volumes, like looking at this image, in the distance over the, I can't remember what rooms there were. There's double height rooms. The transformer might have been in there or something.
That's right.
Yeah. Above that and the dirt around it. I'm just interested in understanding what kind of depth you've got. Yeah, I mean, I'll just preface this by I loved your precedents and I bemoan the fact that, buildings, this is a big block, that there's not much relief in it. And I think that's what made those precedents so compelling. So that is a general comment, because this, I don't know, I just got the sense it's really a big block without much relief. But I was, curious what that dimension is.
You're talking about the dimension, like where we are
Yeah.
pushing in
Yeah.
here at the stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan, do you have a sense of what that is? I think it's about a foot or potentially 18 inches.
I think it's Ryan is not there. I think it's around, yeah, it's less than 2 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, Ryan just said 2 feet. Yeah.
It would be
That's
great to understand if that's similar to next door at Revolution. 'Cause I feel like that's a place where that building could be improved. The back and forth of there doesn't feel very significant on that building.
Agreed. It feels quite flat.
Yeah, actually a lot of the projects, I would say, in assembly suffer. That's why I said I bemoan this condition.
Yeah.
And the most successful parts of this are where you have balconies. So
Mhm.
just a comment, I wish there was more relief in this, and sort of, so it sort of gives the project more architectural integrity, I think, when there's, when there is that kind of relief. I'm also being transit conscious, wondering if they're, along Grand Union. Yeah, in front of the transformer area, whether that can be actually a special moment. It's a solid wall. I don't know, may have louvers in it, or it looks like maybe, doors, the roll up doors, but it feels like it should be, you take advantage. It's a solid wall. You've got parking garage on either side, which you're doing some image
Yeah.
in the mesh, but just feels like another opportunity to enliven this street, and maybe could be more interesting, more impactful.
Are you talking?
Because people are going to be hanging out there, right? You're going to have, that's where people are going to be dwelling in this project, at in the entries, the entry points on that location.
You're talking about here at the
Yeah.
transformer vaults.
Yeah.
Okay.
People wait forever for buses, and is there something that can be done in that area?
Yeah.
The additional
I-
seating as it's possible in that area too would be really helpful, because people are going to be sitting there waiting.
Right.
There is some
Um,
seating, but more near the entry.
Mhm. That
Mhm.
run feels pretty long without
Yeah.
any seating, and understanding that you've got those kind of right now blank doors behind it. It doesn't feel particularly friendly to folks taking public transit.
Yeah, it's the north side of the building, all that. Yeah, so.
Or
something-
actually east.
Oh, it's
It's
east.
planned.
Oh, okay.
It's planned north. Yeah. But
Yeah, and then I had a question about the height of the space, the outdoor area that would be childcare, play, or restaurant. Yeah, that's double height. So
that's
that
right.
It's the parking area. Yeah. So what kind of sunlight is that going to get? Have you done light studies?
Yes, it will be afternoon light.
Yeah. So that's sort of west, you're saying.
Correct.
South.
That's right.
Correct.
Northwest. This part is northwest. Yeah.
Oh, I'm totally.
But you get some. Yep, you get some sun. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the summer. Yeah, because the success of that will be, I mean, the materiality of it, I think, is good. I like the shapely columns. But I think, I don't know how you could maximize the lighting in there.
Yeah.
Maybe initial lighting that brightens that space.
And is it
Because of
required? Is it required to be a daycare, or is it?
It's not required.
It's a goal.
Okay. I thought
We're
in
just
the zoning that we looked at first, it said retail/daycare, and that was Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, they're both approved uses. We would just prefer to have a daycare in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Talk about the materiality of the cladding of the parking areas at the second level.
Sure, yeah. So all around this level, we're going to skin the parking in either a metal panel, potentially a perforated metal panel that would give a little more availability of a graphic animating the facades. We don't want to go overboard, but we're looking at that. We're also thinking of potentially introducing some polycarbonate to get light into the parking garage.
Okay. Is it intended to be a naturally ventilated garage?
It is not. It's going to be enclosed, but unconditioned.
We done with questions?
So
Awesome. Cool.
I've got a comment.
Sure.
Bring it, Tim.
Sure. So picking up on one of the things we were talking about before on the east side. Well, I guess first of all, it's great to see a project moving forward on this site, kind of filling in this piece of Assembly Square. I think generally the conceptual direction, the reading of the site, its context, the breaking down of the building into pieces is good. But I think there's several more detailed comments. Can you go to maybe the master plan slide? Because I think we talked about that east side condition along the sidewalk at the bus stop, but it's also opposite block 7 there, where at least with this massing, that's going to be kind of the drop off and lobby entrance of block 7. And I think there's a question of really what is the character of Grand Union Boulevard. It varies today, but on the existing buildings, there's retail at the base of the buildings, and especially with the addition of the bike lanes on Grand Union, it feels like a good street, at least where the existing buildings are, and there's people there. I feel like the proposed uses on this building, along that side of the building, having parking on the ground level facing out on the street would be kind of unfortunate along that street. Would you be able to go to that ground level plan? Yeah, the next slide there. So the transformer vault and then parking facing out right next to the lobby along a pretty long expanse. That's a pretty long expanse and blank facade. I wonder if that bit of parking is necessary. Could that be another location for retail, amenity space, some type of active use along the base of the building there? If that small bay of parking were eliminated and the transformers were consolidated.
I kind of agree with you on the parking spots. That said, I actually like that they're kind of pushing some of the back of the building towards Grand Union as opposed to Harold Cohen. There is retail on Grand Union, but it's not consistent. There are transformer vaults farther down, and some of the retail is like out back, the donut shop, but there are expanses of kind of nothing within those buildings because they've ganged the retail really up on Assembly Row in a really nice way. And I'm excited and happy to hear that we're considering Harold Cohen the beginning of sort of a second run of Assembly Row itself. Grand Union, letting Grand Union be, still pedestrian friendly, but taking some of that service makes a lot of sense to me, and starts hopefully turning Harold Cohen into something that's really special. That said, it does seem like that corner over by the park the adjacency by the park and the fact that we do have really valuable open space almost directly adjacent to the space, that the fact that there's not a stronger relationship, or there's something programmatically that doesn't feel a little bit more significant there, does feel like a little bit of a loss. The building across the street does have an entry there on that corner as well. It's not the primary entry, but it is, you know, a major entry, and it's I really like the entry on it. Sliding it to sort of mid block does feel a little bit off. And another comment I have on the building and just in general is, I think on both of the entries, especially on the other one, if you guys weren't writing block 9 right above it, I'm not sure that there's anything about this building that's really kind of telling me that those are the entries. On this elevation, I would be hard pressed to guess that where that main entry is that main entry. And I know in the other views we've looked at, the building wall kind of angles in, but it's pretty gentle. It doesn't feel like it's, you know, announcing it in any significant way. And the landscape does change a little bit, but I think that there's a room to be a little bit bolder in sort of letting us know that that's the main entry of the building, especially if you are the first group kind of setting off Harold Cohen as a front main street, which I guess not entirely the first, because across the street it's doing that same thing too. On the landscape, I think you guys have done a very good job matching some of the adjacent buildings. So the one spot that did jump out was the bus stop area as having the potential to be more friendly. Yeah, that does feel
right.
That does feel like
Yeah.
it has room
I can
for
maybe
improvement.
speak. Sorry for the interruption there. This is Patrick again. I can maybe speak to that, but I certainly don't want to interrupt Andrew.
Yep, no, go for
it. Thank you very much on all of those comments, and maybe I can try my best to take a stab at each. On the bus stop, I actually we couldn't agree more. There is an ongoing conversation right now, and I think I'm confident enough that I can say this publicly, that Sarah Rogers on our team is having with the mobility folks at the city, as well as the MBTA, about relocating that bus stop, sort of plan, directionally north, plan west if we're looking at the screen, but directionally north across Foley down Grand Union. Don't know, there we go. Thanks a lot, Kristen. Don't know that that is not a fait accompli, but that is an active conversation with both the city and the T, which we're very supportive of. It would also give us, obviously, the opportunity to do something much more special where that bus stop is today, both from a design perspective on the building, as well as a landscape design and hardscape design. And so noted on the architectural comments relative to announcing entries. You know, we've got the main entry off of Harold Cohen. We do have a meaningful secondary entry off of Grand Union. You're right; those we sort of are understated in the way that we announce those, as well. That corner facing the park, that's an important one. So I think those are all very helpful comments and quite a bit for us to focus on.
Excellent. It would be great, I guess, with that in mind, just to see if the bus stop, just a little inset to see if the bus stop does move, what you guys would do with that additional landscape as an alternate. And I love the idea of the daycare, probably more of a longer term discussion, but there is not a lot of play space for children designated in Assembly itself. While this, it would be good to understand that this would meet the 75 square feet per kid, that it's even possible to be a play space with those requirements. And if it's not, where and how play could be accommodated elsewhere on the site, because the play opportunities in Assembly right now are pretty tapped out.
I'm gonna
also could not
that.
agree, more with you there. We'd love to sort of enhance that and expand it. Specific to this, our proposed daycare center here, what you're looking at on the screen, the dedicated outdoor space, is not enough to satisfy the requirement on site. It's part of satisfying the requirement. The other way that daycare centers satisfy this requirement is locating a public area within a set distance. I wish I knew that off the top of my head. I don't. When we come back, we can tell you that. However, what we do know is the park that Biomed has built, which we know right now is temporary, but ultimately will evolve to a permanent park that is large enough and close enough to satisfy the requirement, plus what we could do for them sort of in the space that you're looking at on the screen. So at the same time, it doesn't solve for, I think, an overall need at Assembly, which is for more outdoor space for kids of all ages.
I think whether it becomes a daycare, which would be fantastic, or it just, becomes outdoor dining or something, I think it really enhances the being next to the main entry, and then doing something special on that street. I think it's a really nice moment on this block.
It's different than other, like it's a different thing that we haven't seen before. So I agree. I think it's lovely, and I'm excited to see it.
My only other comment, which I made as part of my question, was can you get additional depth in this facade? Yeah, I think that would be meaningful.
We'll certainly look at pushing it as far as we can.
I think as long as we're on this view, I know one of the conversations we've had when reviewing other buildings in Assembly Square has been about the character of retail storefronts, signage, bans, and related elements. Understanding that the actual details of retail storefronts will be designed by tenants. One of the design guidelines does speak to facade materials not coming down to the ground at retail storefronts, and kind of distinguishing the character of that ground level with retailers. I wonder whether, especially along this elevation, along Foley, which is the primary retail elevation, whether there's some additional development of a storefront, and especially the signage ban that could be done. With the second level as parking, there's the opportunity for that to push up and perhaps become more prominent too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are helpful ideas for concepts for us to explore. It's particularly to sort of help articulate the facade a bit better and give some relief and some dimension, some dimensioning to it.
All right, commissioners, how do we want to proceed?
So I know Assembly is a little different. So we're not going to choose a massing. Do we just ask to come back with the changes, or what's the process, Sarah?
The process can be, you're exactly right. We have flexibility. So if you would like to see of the suggestions you made, if you would like to see those, then we can continue the project to the next meeting to incorporate some of the discussion that we've had.
And I think a project of this scale, that makes sense. I see Deborah nodding her head, so.
Can I ask one other piece too, based on the conversations that we had around the HVAC vents on previous projects? Can we add that to the list of details that we can think about at the next meeting? All right, in that case, I think we need a motion to continue Block 9 to our next meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Deborah, seconded by
Seconded.
Andrew. Roll call vote. Andrew,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
and Tim.
Yes.
Thank you all.
And Sarah, I think I
Yes.
mentioned I will not be at the next meeting, and I know we're struggling with quorum issues. So just to let everyone know that I don't know that we would hit quorum for this project in the next meeting.
Okay, I will double check with Sherry tomorrow morning, because hopefully that will be that will be the relief valve. We'll make sure we still get our landscape architect on board and we make quorum.
Great.
So, all right. Thank you, team. We will see you. I believe the next meeting is scheduled right now for September 24th, but I will be in touch regardless. So
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good to see you all.
Good
Thank
to
you.
see you.
all right. Next on the agenda, our final item is other business as Summa Nova updates. So, and this is mostly, I wanted to let you all know, I think you saw that the comment letter was submitted for public comments to the city council. So that will be shared with the land use committee. Along those lines too, I'm not sure if anybody was listening into the planning board last Thursday. They took up the proposal to discuss for the planning board to make a recommendation to the city council as well. That's part of their purview. The planning board opted to make a no recommendation because they had a very much similar reactions to the comments that you all had made, that this was a significant project and there had been not enough public process to determine sort of scale and density for moving that forward. There have been lots of conversations within the city as to what that looks like as we do move forward. There have been pieces that we've been working on from a zoning perspective for arts uses and redefining lab uses. And so how all of those pieces come together is what we're looking at now into a consolidated whole. But that I think hopefully we're going to have some further direction over the next few weeks as to what that looks like. So I didn't know if there was any discussion needed. I just wanted to make sure that you guys were updated.
Thank you for the update. Is part of that zoning related discussion, does it have to do with, or could it have to do with this commission's role in reviewing urban design plans? And whether that's something that needs zoning changes, could be incorporated in zoning?
That's I think that's a larger question as to do with, because that becomes a purview question rather than a specific issue question. And so right now the zoning changes are more specifically, based on MAPC did the study regarding the arts uses, and sort of, so a lot of the zoning things that I was referring to are ACE use definitions, FAB district, sort of those kind of level of zoning deep in the weeds rather than the broader brush process questions. But that is something that definitely will be discussed as part of this. We've sort of had how these, if we're going to see more of these master plan, I'm going to back up for a second, sorry. The difficulty here, and this was part of the discussion with the planning board, is the difference between the actual proposal, as in what is proposed that is master plan elements versus what is actual zoning process. So this was the first time there was sort of more of a muddling across the two to try to write zoning that was more prescriptive at the request of the neighborhood involvement that the applicant was having. So it's been a difficult, what's a lot difficult to navigate is sort of what is appropriate at the zoning level versus at a master plan level. And I think that's where we're struggling internally to figure out what that definition ends up being, because it was not intended to be this under the ordinance, and whether that's a direction that, you know, sort of we, the city, should be considering more heavily is a little tricky. And what are the legal repercussions for that as well? You know, sort of at this point, we don't really know how all that falls under, or if there's any conflict with 40A.
Mhm.
So I know it's not a satisfying answer, but we will do. I hear you loud and clear, and we will need to talk about that as we move forward. But it's sort of a slightly different issue than where we are right now.
Thank you for doing that.
Of course. All right. One more motion. Who wants it?
I motion we to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Deborah, seconded by Andrew. Roll call vote. Frank. I didn't hear him, but I saw his lips move yes.
Yes.
There we go. Andrew.
Yes.
Deborah.
Yes.
And Tim.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Good night. Have a good evening.